Hello, it's Thor from the Petz community, and I wanted to do a little tutorial on how I could make the pets in the Petz game, specifically cats, look with realistic patterns. I usually like to do this on mixed breeds, and I wanted to show my technique for other people. This could also be used for purebreds in conformation, but I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of realistic cats, so I'm just going to kind of show how I decide my patterns and stuff. But before we do that, we have to talk about the patterns. So they're kind of divided into a few different things. We'll just start with the most basic pattern, which is called solid. Solid is basically the cat is just one color. So it could be 20s, which is gray. It could be 65s, which is orange. It could be the, blue, the 110s. But anyway, whatever color you decide for your cat is just solid, one color. We're not going to talk about white right now. So we're not going to talk about white, but we'll talk about solid, could be any color. Next, we'll talk about tabby. So tabby is another pattern that a cat could be, and that just is basically stripes. So tabby is divided into two colors. We have the body color, and then we have the stripe color. And the body color is typically a lighter color, so you just pick any of the Petz colors, pick the light color, and then the stripe is typically a darker color. Now, again, if you're not going for realism, if you just want to, have a cool striped cat, you could reverse that thought process, but typically you just pick two colors. One, the body is lighter than the stripe. Of course, for realism, there's a bit more complication, but I'm not going to go into that. Direction is also important for tabbies. So direction of the stripes. So tail, feet, legs, those are all going to be horizontal, as well as the ears, but the ears could be solid, and the cheeks as well. So the direction of, again, the points are all horizontal. The body and the head are vertical, typically, but you could also have other textures and like grizzle, rosettes, I don't know, there's all sorts of tab spots, there's spotted tabby. So anyway, that could be on the body instead of, and the head instead of vertical stripes. Now, tabby can also use the PFM tabby textures, which don't really have a direction. So if you're using those, it doesn't really matter too much. Just try your best. But if you do use tabby textures that have a direction, that's usually how you would do those. The next one we're going to talk about is a tortoiseshell. Tortoiseshell is basically when a cat has two colors. Again, not including white. It could be any color. And it could be orange, black, cream blue. You could also do third color if you want. I've seen people do like 3 colors together, but typically it's just 2 colors. Again, we're ignoring white. And you just kind of just put them in patches. So you just put them in patches, or if you want it to be PFM calico, literally just color the hip, the left hip, red, the right hip black, the butt black, etc. So you could just do that randomly, and that's kind of how you do tortie or tortoiseshell. And then you could add patches like the PFM calico, but there's also textures. There's some really nice long way home textures and cargo textures that also do tortoiseshell really well. The next one is actually a combination of tabby and tortoiseshell called a torby. So a torby is essentially like a tortie patch, but it can be, instead of solid colors, it could be tabby patterns. So again, you pick 2. I don't know if I want to call it 2 colors, because remember, this is not always colors, so I'm just going to say pick 2. So you just pick 2, and it could be 2 tabby color combinations. So you could have, orange with a dark orange stripe as one of your pick 2s, and then you could have, solid black as your second one. So you could get real creative. So you could have 2 tabbies as your pick two different tabby colors. You could, as long as you have at least one tabby that's like patchy. So it's kind of like you combine the 2 patterns together. That's how I like to think about it. So those are kind of like the main ones. I guess we could do smoke, but the smoke is just kind of a texture onto solid. So like solid is either like colors or like smoke textures or grizzled textures. So we'll just consider all that solid for now. But anyway, I'm going to talk about like some modifiers that cats have. And so one of the modifiers is color point. And what color point is that you have darker tips. So I'm going to draw another cat here. So what do I mean by darker tips? So we have typically, so you have 2 colors again. Color point has 2 colors. You have the body color, which is typically lighter, and then you have the points color. And a point is essentially the tail is a point, feet, legs, those are points, ears, and then also like the face is also a point. So points are always darker. So you could pick 2 colors again, just pick any 2 Petz colors. I'm not going to talk about realism right now, and just apply it. And again, this is kind of like a modifier for solid, because solid, you could kind of just pick 2 solid colors. And the reason why I'm saying solid is because you bet you could also do color point on a tabby. So again, it modifies the tabby. You could have a darker tabby point and then choose a lighter tabby point as your body color. So you can actually apply it to tabby in that way. You could also apply it to tortie. So you can have points that are tortie and have a solid body, or you could have like a light tortie points, or sorry, body, and a darker tortie points. You can get real creative. Again, if you're not doing realistic, if you just want to choose some colors and make things look pretty, that's kind of what I do. And you could also do this to Torby as well. So you could modify your cat by just picking a body and a points color that is darker. And again, it could be also a pattern tabby, Torby, or tortie as a points or body. So you get real creative. You could also use smoke too. You could have a smoke texture as the points, and then the body could be solid color white. Like, you could get real creative. So that's why I call it a modifiers, because you can have like a color point solid cat, a color point tabby, color point torby, color point tortie. And of course, there's a bunch of rules for this for realistic. But if you just want to pick 2 colors that go well together, you can go crazy. This is what I do with mixed breeds, so it doesn't really matter sometimes if they're realistic. I just kind of choose what I like. There's also another modifier that I'm going to call shading. So cats can be shaded. There's probably proper terms for all this, but I'm not a catologist, so I don't actually know all the proper terms. I'm just showing people how to hex for pets. So shading is kind of just, it's like color point, but typically you don't choose a completely different color on the points. You basically choose like a shade on the points, and you could basically choose like a lighter color. Typically when you use solid Petz colors, you can't do this because the difference between white and gray is too stark. So you might have to use textures to accomplish this. Smoke is a good example, because smoke has a lot of textures that are just slightly darker than each one. So there's some really good textures for smoke on cargo that are really good for shading. There's also grizzled textures, which grizzled is basically just like a bunch of spots. So you could actually do a lot of really cool stuff with like those textures. And I think you can actually combine shading with all of these as well. I've seen shading be used like a tortie shade where it was like they had like chinchilla, which is like grizzled, but like it was 2 different colors, so it was almost like it was like a tortie shading. I don't know if you could do it with tabby, so I'm going to remove these arrows just in case. But actually, I have done tabby where I've had like darker like darker shades on the top of the cat or dorsal stripe. But anyway, whatever, that's shading. The last thing we have to talk about, which is also a modifier, is white. We've avoided white because I said you can't talk about white in any of these unless I guess it's tabby and you have white as like your base. You could do that. Same with color point, you could have white as your body. But anyway, let's talk about how white patches work. So cats can have white patches. Oh, that was supposed to erase. There you go. So I'm going to have to draw one more cat here. So cats can have white. And I'm going to use gray to kind of show white here. So white is basically on top of any of these patterns. So you could have a tabby cat that has, white paws. Or maybe he has a little white face. So you basically use the tabby pattern, but you put a little white. Okay, maybe you want to make a tortie cat, but now this whole part is white. So like all his legs are white, his face is, the bottom half of his face is white, his chest and belly are white, and maybe he has mostly white legs. So now he's a tortie, so he might have pick two colors like black, red, and now he has, white patches there. So white kind of covers the patterns. So let's do, another tortie, orange, black, and suddenly he has white more. And now let's say that this part is not white, so there's like patches of black and orange showing through while the rest of the cat is white. Again, gray is supposed to be white here. So that's why we have patches of like calico, the little, orange and black pieces. You could also do this with Torby. You can have one of the spots has a little tabby stripes. And again, the stripes have to follow the direction. I don't know if I was really specific about this, but direction is still important. Even when you have patches that have tabby, you have to make sure that the tails are vertical and the body is horizontal. Anyway, you could also have a completely white cat. So you could, or just like completely white except for like the ears and the tail. I guess I went a little gung-ho here on the ears, but that's fine. Or you could just have a completely white cat, which I guess, is like a solid white cat. So that's how white works. You could just kind of put it on top of a pattern, and it basically like you're putting an eraser to that pattern is how I like to think about it. And that's basically how do I make like cat patterns really easily. I just kind of pick, do I want to do solid, tabby, tortie? Do I want to make it a color point or just keep it simple? Do I want to add any white? And then shading, I guess, is more kind of like for solid, but I guess I'll draw an arrow for solid. Oops. Because I feel like shading is more like something that gets applied to solid, but I feel like you could probably do it in other places too. But anyway, and that's it. That's how Thor hexes cats for the Petz game. Thanks for watching.